Welcome. I think most of the joinees here are old participants of the Future Fitness Gym. But so just for you, the Future Fitness Gym is a place which I think a lot of references to your post as well is basically a place where all of us get together and do some regular actions like in a gym for physical fitness. This is for future relevance. So that's what we've been doing for the last few months, where people read, people watch videos, people do some exercises. And every month we have a live call like this, where we invite a special guest and we pick their brains on topics like work from home setup or improv. How do you use improv in learning? And today is about personal information management, and it really piqued our interest when we read this first, because we see it resonated with a lot of the things that we do. So we thought we'll have you here. So thanks a lot.
Yeah, so great to be here and intrigued by what you guys are doing, and love to. I mean, delighted to be here, and I would love to go through this with you guys. And yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Sajith. The way we do this is there are three sections. The C section where we learn something new. T is where we have a stimulating interview and where we'll be picking your brains. And the last section will be some questions and wisecracks. So the C section is generally where we summarize whatever we've read. But before that, we wanted to do a quick poll just to get a sense of what the audience thinks about some of these questions around personal information management. So I've launched the poll. In case you are able to see it, you can start submitting your answers. These are the questions. Why are you interested in personal information management? And the second question is, what methods do you use to save interesting or important information you come across online? Both these questions are questions that I personally have, at least the second one is one that I've personally struggled with, tried to find my own hacks. So we thought we'll get a sense of what you guys have also been doing. So for the first question, the top answer seems to be because I like staying organized.
Okay, interesting.
And what methods? Email the content or URL to self. That's an interesting one. Save it to a bookmarking site or app. Yeah. Copy paste the URL into a Word doc or Excel sheet. Again, seems to be a top one. Save as a bookmark favorite. Great. We're very similar in terms of what are the things that we have come across. Not many surprises till now. We shared the article that we'll be discussing with everyone who's participating today. Great article on personal information management assistants. Is it fair to say, Sajith, is it fair to call them PIMAs already? Can we actually use that acronym?
You could. Yeah, just makes it more convenient. Yeah. But yeah.
So a very interesting article, and like I said, it resonated with us at multiple levels. Because we've been running these CTQ compounds where some people have actually been using these compounds as a source of curation. That resonated quite well. And there are two big takeaways for us from the article. One was you talked about how it is not that common yet having an information assistant, but you equated it with cooking that we do. It's a great metaphor that I thought it summed it up quite nicely, because at least pre-COVID, most of the cooking duties had been outsourced and people would pick it up only for doing something special. Right?
Yeah.
It was on certain occasions or when you want to do something that really appeals to you, but it's not something that you will not do, right? It is part of your daily diet, like your food diet. This is what you're talking about here is information diet. So you need it, absolutely. You're not saying that to take that out. So it has to be done. But at least the part which is mandatory, like compliance kind of a thing, that's being taken care of by someone, and you do the ones which you are really interested in. So that was a very interesting parallel that we saw. And the second big one was how you have actually tried to sort of make these two levels for PIMAs. And I think this is where your VC background is coming in, where you're actually picking up a business model around it and what all are the different ways in which this can be sold, and whether it's shared or part-time, full-time summarizers. Again, though it's not mentioned here, I like the parallel that you drew with these fitness trainers.
Yeah.
Where there's one trainer who's going to just come and tell you that this is what you need to do. Whereas the other one it's also about summarizing, not just creation. And the status symbols one was also something which, again, as it goes with all these things, you really never know what is the job to be done for some of these things. Maybe status symbol is the one that people are looking for. So these two parallels or metaphors really struck us, and we thought it was a great way of putting this together. And these are two big highlights for us. So at this point, any other thoughts from any of the other participants before I go to Sajith and ask him more questions? Any other comments that any of you had after reading this article? You can raise your hand and you can take those comments.
Can I say, can I go?
Yes, Swami.
Yeah. So, hi, Sajith. Yeah, I read the article too. And
Hi,
before I realized that the article was over, that's what struck me. It's a really brief one. Wow. You put quite a lot into it. No, I was just thinking whether it is fundamentally anything is going to be different for, at least the way I saw the article, it was more for the CEOs, people are somewhat at the top of the pile. But I was wondering if it's really going to be that different for people like me who are generally doing their own thing and are not interested in any piles, really. That sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Fair.
Yeah.
Okay. I do think it's specifically for people who are time poor and
Right.
typically drowning in a lot of art stuff to be read. And specifically also, I think for me, I think it came also because specifically podcasts is becoming a challenge. And because podcasts, the issue is there's also a related article I wrote. I'll try and share it with you. It's there in my website. And to do with the fact that podcasts have a very unusual ratio of creation time to consumption time. They have one of the lowest ratios of creation time to consumption. What I mean is, uh, as opposed to writing an article, which like this would have taken me like an hour to write, maybe. I don't know, hour and a half. Maybe it was in May. I wrote it very quickly. But typically an article would take as much as 8-10 hours to write, because a good article of 1500 words, and it can be consumed in like 11-12 minutes. So the ratio is like 1 is to like what, 32? And whereas for a podcast, it's typically 1 is to 4. It takes 4 hours to create and put it out there, and it takes 1 hour to listen to that 1 hour podcast. So I think the challenge, I think, came from podcasts specifically, because there's a lot of high quality information now in podcasts. And we're beginning to see like bizarre, like a Seen and the Unseen is like 3-4 hours, 5 hours even. Like it's insane. So I don't know. Maybe there are people who listen to it, but I'd love to listen. In fact, I paid nearly 1,000 rupees to get someone to transcribe one particular episode of Seen and the Unseen so that I could read it. I just didn't have the time to sit in for 3 hours. So I think I think you're right in the sense that it's like cooking, right? Cooking was something that only the really rich could afford once. And to have a cook was like a statement. But slowly over time, it's got democratized and all of us can afford. So I think some variants of this we'll start seeing, is my sense. And specifically podcast transcriptions stuff could become one area. But yeah, Blinkist is like really it's like the fast food of PIMA, right? It's like the McDonald's hamburger, whatever it is, veggie burger equivalent. So yeah, so these are my thoughts. And I don't think it's only for the super rich, but I think that's typically where it will start. And there'll be more democratic solutions, etc. And I think the highest friction is there. And instead, after I put that thing out and it got tweeted, but 3-4 people reached out to me saying, I would love to transcribe it for you and I'd love to get this thing. And I was like a little taken aback. Oh, okay. And maybe internship. It could be a great way to have interns. Yeah. So someone could say, I want to work with you guys. And I don't know. And I can say that I believe Kunal Shah of Cred. Again, don't tweet about this, etc. But I heard or someone mentioned it in my TL that he has an assistant who does this for him. So great. I remember that all of these billionaires, for example, will have an EA, an executive assistant MBA, and typically they curate interesting articles and stuff like that. So yeah, you're right. It will start from the super rich, but rich, and it'll become more democratic. Yeah, that's what I
Thank
think. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Ramanan, you want to go next? Your comment?
Yeah, I just want, maybe we'll get to this later in the questions as well, but what do you think is the typical brief that, let's say, a CEO or someone maybe heading a VC firm would give to these assistants?
Yeah. So I think every month, typically, one relevant book comes, or one or two relevant books come out. So like Trillion Dollar Coach, No Rules, etc. These are not books which give you, one odd book may give you extreme joy, learning, insight. There are books like, for example, there's a very interesting book which is fairly expensive called Founding Sales. It's for SaaS businesses, etc. It's extremely useful, but it's work. It's sincere work. And I would say there are about 10, 12 key principles, etc. So there's a hierarchy of these, which are generic business books, which have appealed trillion dollar coaches of the world. What you do is who you are, etc. Which dare say can be read in 4, 5, 6 hours. Two is books which are very specific to your work, which give you a lot more insight. And yeah, and so I think the first set of books is a real challenge. They don't give you an extreme amount of joy. Maybe the odd book will give you a lot of joy, okay, but they don't give you a lot of joy. And there, I think the thing is, the brief that would give is, can someone just read this and tell me what it is about? And so I think broadly, this is a wonderful book I read by this French philosopher. It's about how Pierre Bourdieu. So it says how to talk about books you haven't read. Okay, now it's like a funny book, but funny title. But the book is very serious. So the book talks about something very interesting, that I could have read a particular book, and let's say you talk to me, I read the book 5, 6 years back. Let's say it's The Innovator's Dilemma. And you ask me, what's a book about? Do you remember this paragraph? And I'll say, oh my God, what did I read? I don't remember. Whereas you've read a summary of it, or you've read like YouTube video of the person, etc. And then you're more well informed. So book reading is not binary, that what you know, what you read is what you know. It falls into a continuum. And I think there's also, for example, a great way to read a book, like a complicated book also, they say is don't read the book, but read the review, read the summary, read the interview of the guy, etc. Right? I think these are all ways in which you deal with information thing. But the brief I would say is, what is it about? And primarily what you're doing is really getting a sense of how relevant the book is. And I think the most important thing is, for example, when I read No Rules, like I just went through it like over a day and a half, and I immediately know on my library where it falls. Is it a seminal book? No way. Of course, there may be one or two odd people who find it like the most important book they read in their life. And that's the thing with books. Ramanand's favorite book will never be my favorite book, or rarely. The book which impacted, for example, Harish and turned his life around, maybe, oh, really? I'll say that. And similarly, vice versa. So I think what you miss in reading this thing is in the hierarchy of where information slots, you're not able to say how important it is. I think that's what you'd lose with the PIMA when somebody else does it for you, because PIMA will come back and say, and that's the issue with Blinkist. When Blinkist gives a summary, no one from Blinkist is saying, this is not an important book. It's only 3 pages because itna hi funda hai, ek hi idea hai. Whereas every summary of Blinkist is 8 pages. Even the best book that they go through will be 8 pages, 12 pages. And this has been my issue with this. So my issue with summary should be 3 to 30 pages long. And for example, the best, there's a wonderful, I know it's a summary review of Seeing Like a State, one of the great books by James Scott, written by Venkatesh Rao of VGR, and Scott Alexander of State Star Codex has written a summary of his own. These are like incredible things which they say probably better than the book, because they're contextualizing, they're reviewing it, they're chewing, digesting, and bringing it out. So I think, so these are my thoughts. And I think the brief I would really say is, my challenges with books like this, which are work, which is not going to give me great joy. Like what reading things take care. But I think I'll go to, it's like people say, right? I get someone was saying that I order a lot of Kindle books. If I really like it, then I'll order a physical book. The equivalent of this is I get my PIMA to go through all of these books, but I keep hearing good book, and I find it interesting, then I'll read it. So this is, I don't know if it's all making sense. But
I just wanted to add, it reminded me of a third parallel, which is if you see how humans and the relationship between humans, nutrition and food we started to learn to cook it so that it would become more nicer to eat. You could release the nutrients better. In some sense, your PIMAs are chewing the books in advance, and so that you have a better experience, a faster experience, and get more nutrition for the amount of time you spend. So there's a third parallel to that too.
True.
In fact, Raman, I had a question which is parallel to what you just mentioned, because I was wondering when Sajith was saying this, that is it also a function of what you are taking the book for? So what different sources of information that you're looking at, whether it's a book or a podcast or an article, and what is the objective of it? What is the value of that source in your mind? And you're trying to place this somewhere in that mental library. So then does that also play a role in whether it is PIMAable or not?
Yeah, I think it's a great point. It's a super great point. So I think PIMAing a book like Guns, Germs and Steel is a bad idea. Or The Silk Roads by Peter Frankopan is a bad idea. So there are certain books which are fiction, of course, is super bad idea. But yeah, so there are different PIMA versions that come there. Yeah, I think specifically non-fiction, I probably put it into books which give you information versus books which give you insight. Okay? So and then there are fiction, which is books which give you insight but don't seem like they're giving you insight, but they give you actually wisdom and like super high level this thing. Philosophical insight, so to say. Okay, so I think books which give you insight, which are about history, so especially like mega histories, for example, or even historical books, etc. I think they are not PIMAable, and you shouldn't PIMA like a book like The Silk Roads, because I don't think you should. Maybe you can read us. I don't know. Like, how would you read a summary of it? I don't know. But books like any business book, I think you should, like, because business books, to my mind, also have 1 to 2 ideas, and the nature of the publishing industry means you have to expand it into 240 pages because it has to fit into that. I don't think there are more than, all of them could have been very well written articles, and that's a sad part of it. Yeah, so that's my view. I think you're absolutely right what you seek for, and I think if you're seeking information, being current with what is happening, then I think all those are PIMAable. I think business books is the real business books, business podcasts is where I think PIMAs can really help. Not so sure about like any of Ramchandra Guha's books, for example, which are, so that's what I would think.
Right.
I also have different theories on reading, which we can cover if you have time. But yeah.
Yeah. So in fact, not just on reading, but when we had asked for registrations, people also were talking about note taking. Right. Note taking is generally when you have consumed information, just to make sure that it's accessible for you, and you're getting what you had read earlier, you're able to get to it as soon as possible. But here you are talking about curation of the source itself. They're two different things. And now you mentioned reading. We'll be happy to take a couple of minutes with you talking about your take on reading as well. So sure. Where do you see this fitting? So is this like a continuum? Is this like a funnel where you're talking about curation first? How do you read and how do you retrieve?
Yeah. Lots of questions. So I think I've met enough successful people, intelligent people to know that, and I've met many of them who don't read. So I think this took me a lot of time to come to the conclusion, and I feel like there are many different ways of absorbing information. And I think people who read are a category of people I call visiles. And I think I came across this term in this wonderful book called Hedgehogging by a guy called Barton Biggs. It's a wonderful book on finance, and it's very easy to read. It's about how they raise a hedge fund. There are two types of people, he says, visiles and audiles. Audiles like to hear, talk. So I had this boss who would go into a meeting, and before I went to the meeting, I would read about everything about that person. And he would give him the information on the way during those days. I was in sales, and they would listen to me and said, and he was like this Punjabi, paisa bahut acha kiya, but rehne dijiye, But he would go into it, and those meetings would be long, 3 hours or 2.5 hours, because invariably he used to get into that person. That Lala would have given us 1 hour time, but then he would appointment cancel karo, ye karo, aur chai lao, ye lao. So Rajesh would extract so much out of that person and the thing was that 2.5 hours or 2 hour meeting would give Rajesh much more information that I could have got. And what I found was I wasn't enjoying those meetings and I wasn't able to draw out information because I was a visile and not a nodite. So I feel like there are different types of personalities. And I think reading people typically tend to, because we also write a lot, we typically, and the kind of questions we ask in interviews, what have you read? What do you read? And I think I've tried to change that to what have you learned? How do you learn? And increasingly in tech, you come across a lot more people who are very successful, who don't read, who play around, who tool around, who like but absorb information in a different way. They absorb different types of information. They have a very different way. So it's like a driver. It's like how we look at Bangalore. Look at the GPS of Bangalore, and we know Chandranagar yahan pe, yahan pe. There's a driver who's driven in Bangalore who's not looked at the map. He sees Bangalore in a very different way. Is it wrong? No, it's right for that. So that's my first theory, that I've become less of a reading fascist. So I think. That said, I do believe that I consume information through reading better, and even podcasts, etc. I transcribe, and if I try as much. So there, I think I do take notes. I use Apple Notes, and think this whole debate over Rome, Notion. I think it's all overrated. Use the lowest tech solution, ideally digital. And most critical thing in note taking, I always find, is not note taking, but accessing it back. And that is a challenge that I have and everyone has. You take all those notes and you don't revisit them. Many solutions for that, but the best solution I've found is, and which I've come to conclusion also, is to create. Let's use those notes to write an article or create a newsletter, whatever it is. That is, that forces you to revisit. So I think it's also the case that you end up reading an article and then you come out and you can't even summarize it after that. It's very interesting, guys. So sometimes I try and, which is why I started taking notes, maybe one or two interesting essences, just scrape something and paste it. But I also find interesting connections, because on Apple Notes, you can actually search, say, product market fit or a strategy, and you come across very different things. Sometimes it gives you inspiration to write, etc. So I think note taking I would encourage it, but really to revisit and create. So I don't know if it's all making sense, but lots of thoughts here, but yeah.
Yeah, it's fitting into different blocks of my mental library for sure. A follow-up question to that was, we talked about how we read every day. There's an internal compound and all of that. So one job to be done for us, especially for me, is that whatever we read is actually a source of serendipity, where we have actually set aside those 15 minutes. So is that something which will actually be a price that you will pay when you have things like PIMAs? Because they will say, yeah, this is good for you, but where do you get that left of the field idea from?
Yeah. There, I think it helps. I subscribe to this newsletter called Delancey Place. It's just sends you a page from an interesting book. Every day, it's one page could be about the Inca civilization. Another page could be about the American Indians and the challenges they face. Something is about 3rd century Benedictine priests. So some random stuff. So it's generally interesting. And it's very short. It's like a page from a book, typically a non-fiction book. And the wonderful thing is the surprise that you get. And I think it's the same joy that you get from going to a second-hand bookstore or bookstore, serendipity. And I think serendipity is going to be very highly valued increasingly in that. So I think the primary reason I would subscribe to interesting newsletters is to surprise me, give me these moments of joy. So I think, yes, so probably, which is why you subscribe to certain newsletters which curate the world, right? Interesting articles. But I don't know if forcing yourself to read that I don't know how that is. But I think increasingly, in fact, that's what I'm saying. There are certain PIMAs who curate interestingness. So you pay a certain premium for that curation, which is the Twitter feed, right? So someone like, say, Benedict Evans or Eugene Way, their Twitter feed is inherently more interesting because they're reading more interesting things. And you're saying, let me see the world through your eyes. And so I do think that could become a very interesting thing, where someone curates, one day it's an article on AI, and so there's this website, Substack, that I subscribe to. I pay $40, $34 to $40, something like that, called The Browser. Every day it sends me 5 articles, and this guy called Robert Cottrell probably has a job that I would probably, if I were to run into trouble in my job, I'll probably do things like that. I'll create a newsletter which I can have sent out, something like that. So Browser is particularly fascinating because he writes these really short summaries, and typically I end up reading one article at least. So I think there is huge value in curation. There's huge value in selection by someone who's well read. And I sort of feel like you should actually subscribe to these because it should be someone who's very different from you. So if it was like, so once in a while, if it's very interesting literary news, I wouldn't mind checking it out once in a while. Maybe I wouldn't read as much. The more they're like me, I find it boring. So I'm actually looking for people who are very different, who probably historical books, for example, on 5th century, like Europe or like India, stuff like that. Yeah, I mean.
Yeah. Again, another question that I had in mind, which probably riffs from what you mentioned about the meetings that you had with the Lalaji and all of those things, was, is this also something like a first world problem? Is this, we are all readers, that's why we have actually joined this call as well. Probably there's a huge group of people out there who just don't read or don't even value reading. And we are probably just going too deep into peeling layers.
Yeah, I do think so. I don't think it's so much as first world, so much as there's a personality type who probably need a better term for it. But yeah, readers is, again, these are like people like us who read non-fiction. I think that's what PIMA is. If it's fiction, it's fine. You probably read 50, 60 pages. I don't think it's such an issue. PIMA is not an issue for fiction. Nobody wants somebody else to read. Part of reading Tolstoy, even, or like Jhumpa Lahiri, is the joy of her writing or his writing and just going through it. But yeah, so people like people who feel information is a stock in trade, people who probably want to, so I think there is a challenge there. So I think, but yeah, the biggest learning for me over the last 10 years, decade, has been that you have very successful people who don't read. Some of them are a little embarrassed, but most of them are not embarrassed, and they're as successful, if not more than you. So that has been the biggest kind of issue reconciling for me. Yeah, but I have reconciled it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So one last question from my side before I open it up for other questions. I was listening to one interview of yours where you talked about how Bloom actually outsources some functions, or rather helps founders of your portfolio companies with things like hiring. So do you think information management / finding sources of inspiration is also something like that, which can be seen as a shared service that we see firms actually start offering to their portfolio companies?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So I thought about it. I think we could try it, but it would fail. Because, so I think so we have this challenge. Most founders are young and they don't read much. Some of the most successful founders, we worry that they're not learning. So one of the things we started doing is encouraging them to listen to certain podcasts, so etc. I find out of 4 or 5 things you recommend, they may listen to one. Okay, they will listen to other stuff too, because there are, okay. So we all have this challenge. My view is that they will, the fact that you are recommending something, that if I, for example, sit on someone's board, that Sajith Pai is recommending something, is a signal, and that they're writing that signal. Oh, Sajith Pai thinks it's important for me, because I may be saying it in the context of a certain problem that they have around letting old people go. And that's a challenge. There's some older people that are go. So then I listen to a particular podcast, I feel like, oh, it's about culture. How do you transform a company? And then I tell them, hey, you got to listen to this because this. So that is very important. I think if I kind of create a small division, one person curates 15 articles and sends it, and they'll just delete it. So I think that signaling that I'm doing this and this thing matters to them. Yeah, if I send them, for example, if it's Dunzo and I send them 5 interesting links which are relevant to their industry, he'll maybe look at it and he'll just forward it to someone. I don't know if so. I feel like signaling matters a lot. Personalized curation matters a lot with our founders, and this is a challenge. We try and solve it. We're thinking of different ways to solve it. We will look at some interesting attempts this year where we try and create some sort of information packets or this thing for certain founders, core founders. We'll experiment with a few of these. But end of the day, I think it's a challenge. They've actually become very successful by experimenting, playing around. A lot of them learn by talking, because the kind of information that there is, like how do you design a product in this way, how do you design the UI UX in this way, it's not written anywhere. It's so current and no one knows. They really want different theories. So it's best that they talk to other founders. So they're very successful people and they have their own ways of learning. There's certain founders like who actually learn a lot by reading. So you cater to that type. If he or she enjoys reading, yeah, you certainly try and send them interesting articles, etc. So it's all, a lot of this is trial and error. Like there are no universal theories, and I'm not a fan of universal theories. But my sense is there are certain founders who are more responsive. With them, you can try some of these things. Else to the others, you try and signal the most important article you should read. So like last year, for example, I sent high output management books to all of my founders. I don't think more than 2 people read out of 15. That's how it is. But does that mean you don't try? Yeah, probably next time I won't send high output management. I might send an interesting podcast. Or I might send a summary of the 3 most important learnings I've had or some stuff like that. Yeah. But yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Sajith, any questions from any of the other participants? Open it up right now. You can raise your hand and come to you, or just unmute yourself and speak up. Yeah, Ramanan.
Yeah, while someone thinks of a question, I wanted to ask Sajith, what would you, if you were hiring a PIMA, what would you, look? What signals would you look for in that person? Because there is no, what are the credentials or signals you would look for?
Yeah. So I think someone who's actually a little bit of, it's a good one. So it depends on, again, how much of their time they're investing. If it's like someone who's going to intern with me and is trying out this experiment, then I would look for like some bit of learning from the feedback that I give. So if I say, hey, this is not interesting, this is interesting, and it improves. But if it's like, if Cottrell is a PIMA for me, right? So he's a PIMA in the sense that he's not reading and summarizing it. Actually, in a way, summarizing that if there are 5 articles he sends and there's a short 100-word, sometimes a gist, sometimes an expert from that, which kind of gives you a clue of the article. And you decide, do I really want to read about Sumatran butterflies? Maybe not. I know it's an interesting article, but there's one article, so I'd much rather read about cannibalism amongst the Aztecs. Yeah, because time is limited. But I feel like if it's a branded PIMA, and I think then you would be willing to go with what they have done. And you would say, I'll just take it on face value. So universal things, but I would say that if, for example, I'm willing to pony up, say, 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 a month, let's say, and give it to someone who's like and these days remote is fine, right? Like it could be a student, for example. And the student, like some college says, hey, this is like a great assignment. I'll work 1 year with this VC or whatever. I'll work for him or her and I'll read certain things every day and I'm learning a lot and I'm getting to interact. So it's like a reading internship. And so that could happen. They make a little bit of money and you've got an intelligent person. And hopefully all those interactions have given them some training because you'll also talk about other things of life. Once in a while, when you go to that city or they come to your city, you'll have coffee or dinner with them, etc. So I think that could be an interesting model, and where you have a remote reader. So if that's the case, then I'd probably look for the quality of summary, how they improve, like the ability to, for example, contextualize this for me. You like this, you may like this, but also not giving more of the same, saying, oh, more like what you've already read, so I'll give you something else. So some bit of someone who knows you, gets to know you will be cool. Actually, who knows? It sounds like an interesting internship idea. So yeah.
Yeah, Sirisha, you can unmute yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing I wanted to ask was how easy or difficult is it, or have you ever tried getting someone to read 3 or 4 things or 5 things related to a topic and actually give you a summary of it? A lot of times I get stuck with that where I have a bunch of things, and probably I'm one of those classic examples Ramanand was mentioning about multiple tabs open at the same time. With all the good intent to go back and read and complete and make notes of it, but that never happens. So have you tried where someone can help get all of this summary or gist of all of it together?
No, I haven't. So some folks reached out to me on Twitter saying, I would love to stay. But I haven't given it much thought. But now that I'm talking about it, I'm wondering if it's a good idea. I've not tried this, Sirisha. So, okay. But I think the incentive would have to be, if it's a paid model where there's a senior executive and he or she has like someone like a PIMA who's a student or Could be somebody else who's got a job and is willing to take out an hour a day or 2 hours or 3 hours every week and send this. If it's paid, then I think there's incentive to complete it for the PIMA, because it's a source of alternate money. But yeah, you're right. On your own, I also struggle with it. I was telling them before 6, like that every 3-4 months, I end up purging all the 100 articles. So it's a struggle. I don't think any of us will complete all of the stuff that we find interesting. And this is a challenge. So yeah. Is that your question? Do you feel like I've given you a satisfactory answer? I'm happy to try again.
No, yeah, I think I got it. But yeah, probably I think just experimenting to see, I think like what you mentioned to Ramanand's question, experimenting with the person to actually see how is it that you want the information and what is the kind of information you're looking for an article. Plus actually getting them to see multiple articles at the same time probably will get to what I want. Someone to actually help me on.
It'll take a bit of time to try this out. I don't think there's anything. I don't think there's a cookie cutter approach. What works for you may not be what. See, somebody else might say this is very interesting, but just send me voice notes on WhatsApp. I don't have time for even reading, but it's just stressful. But morning 15 minutes during the walk, you give me voice notes like over the night. I'll listen to it and I might ask you questions, etc. Who knows? So that because fundamentally, like I said with PIMA, you're really solving the information problem. So it's unlikely if I look, end of the day, you are the person who's going to generate the insight. And so your time is more valuable. And unlikely to my mind that someone who's willing to spend time reading for you will be able to generate that kind of insight. So at best, they'll be able to summarize it and things, etc. Yeah. I think that's the best.
And one other question.
Sure.
How do you go about finding people who will help you do this?
I think if you have, I think the way probably I would go about it probably would be like, if I really wanted to, would be like putting it out on Twitter maybe. Or because, see, it's interesting. The best search engine is, I would say it's fascinating, but like the best search engine is Twitter, because when you have more than 10-15,000 followers, because then it's like an incredible real-time search engine. Hey, I'm in Goa, South Goa, what's the best vegetarian restaurant or whatever, like best, whatever. And it'll give you like 10-15 responses. You'll get 3 of them will be decent. Or, hey, once I had this unusual problem whereby I just couldn't get an SMS coming. I don't know. And I put it on Twitter saying there's a problem, and somebody's in my solution saying, hey, remove the number of people you're blocked and they'll solve the problem. I said, what's the connection between the two? He said, trust me, just do it. And I did it, and zoop, my SMSs started coming, because I was having a real problem with OTP. So for people who have like at least 10,000 plus Twitter followers and reasonably decent, not all of them are Albanian bots, I think you should put it on Twitter, or enough fans who are reaching out. If you're reasonably senior, you'll have these people reaching out, hey, I would love to intern with you, etc., etc. So in which case you once in a while try it. If it's paid, look, it's fine. It's not exploitation. Both of you agree on a contract and this thing, they might actually be very happy. So I would probably try it, because I'm of course a little more privileged because I do have a large Twitter follower count, reasonably large by the average standards. And second, a lot of people write into internships, etc. So who knows, maybe something I could try out next year.
Nice. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure.
So one question has come in from Joel. I'll just read it out, Sajith. Hi, Sajith. How was your experience after building your second brain influenced your approach to personal knowledge management? And would doing something like that be good for someone who wishes to be a better PIMA?
Good point. So it's an expensive course. I paid like over $1 lakh for it. And I thought a lot about it. And I don't know, is it Paisa Vasool? I don't know. It's one of those, there are a bunch of these courses which have come. So there is Rite of Passage by David Perel, etc., which typically people who read, etc. So I think one of the big things, I think the big learning is note-taking is relevant in the context of creation. So a lot of it's about note-taking, and note-taking is about organizing your personal knowledge management. Why would you, and I think Tiago Forte's big genius is really saying, why would you collect all this information? Why would you arrange it all neatly, connect the two? It's because you want to do something with it. And that should be creation. And that's why he says, if, for example, like you like collecting stuff about I don't know. So let's say you like reading about, say, football, and you collect this stuff about great managers and or really how the best midfielders play, and you keep collecting this from various things. Turn it into an article. Talk about the 5 best midfielders and the strategies, whatever. So basically, it says create something. It could be podcast, it could be a video, it could be like a newsletter, it could be anything. But the more you create, then so that's the part and come to. So it's not a core BSB building a second brain is not about note taking. It's about better note taking for creation. And I think that is the big learning. And he gives very interesting things like, for example, so what he calls intermediate packets. For example, he's like one of the principles there is that if you take regular notes, then you don't have to worry about starting from scratch. For example, suppose I feel like, let's say someone says, hey, Sajith, we just want you to create an article for us and pay, not pay, etc. And you choose what you want to write about, but broadly in the startup, whatever space. So actually go to my Apple Notes and I can type out 5-6 keywords like you can say product market fit or pricing, for example. And typically, if I've collected some stuff, 7-8 articles will show. And from that, I can just synthesize saying pricing is this, etc. So that is what I think fundamentally is about, saying that don't ever start from zero. It's stressful, like you would be the 0 to 1. So just start. And for that, you have these intermediate packets of information lying around, organized. And that's why you should take notes. So, for example, if you're like a designer, which you should take photographs and put it in your this thing. It's not a thing, and interesting photographs like what's what Pinterest is, right? Yeah. So you pin interesting things for inspiration, mood board. Oh, I pinned these interesting blue colors. I visited Rajasthan, and from that, I'm a Fab India textile designer. I'll create this interesting blue whatever this thing. I don't know. So I think that is, Joel, my learning. I would say that it's not about note taking. I don't think I learned anything major about note taking. Yes, I did learn. There are end of the you end up learning, and there are enough people who have mentioned their review of the course, etc., and they put it online. It's not you can't get all of that. I think 30-40% of the value of the course you can get by just reading stuff. But the biggest learning for me was that course is about creation, faster creation, not about note taking. Yeah, note taking is in service of that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I hope that answers your question, Joel. So one big thing that I have taken from everything that you mentioned, from note taking to PIMA to reading, is what is it in service of? For what? I think that's the underlying theme of everything that you have said. Yeah. Any other questions? If not, I'll move to the next section. Yeah, I think we can move to the next section. Right. Thanks, Sajith, for this wonderful answers that you've shared with us and your take. We end the interview section, that is the T section, and now I know you're also interested in a lot of quizzing. You've interacted with our quizzing newsletter and other brands as well, so I know that you have a soft spot for quizzing. So you can also take a shot at these questions that we have. So these questions are open for all, and you can post your answers in the chat window. Let me open the chat as well. Yes. So the first question is, one of the first personal organizers is named after an abbreviation of the phrase file of facts. Guess the name. You can post your answer in the chat.
Privately or publicly?
Yeah, publicly is fine. Yeah, you've already sent me the correct answer, Sajith. Yes, Sajith gets it right. File of facts. So that's one of the first personal organizers. Did you use it?
No, it's very expensive. The US one is very expensive. Yeah. Okay. I've tried out a lot of these diaries and organizers. In fact, I used to spend a lot of money on them. There's a planner pad. I purchased them in the US for a long while. But finally, I've come to the conclusion that if it doesn't get on your calendar, it's not going to get done. And I now just make sure it gets on the calendar. That's all. So this is my big learning. I've tried all of these things. Yeah.
All right. Let's move to the next question. So which app was introduced in 2007 as a Mozilla Firefox browser extension, initially named Read It Later, and intended to be like a TiVo for web content. Again, open for all, not just for Sajith. Yeah, Soumya gets it right. Sajith also gets it right. It is the Pocket. Pocket was the app that actually launched as Read It Later, and it was just a Firefox plugin to start with. So good one again. So someone needs to be faster than Sajith. Someone needs to access their mental library faster than him.
We have PIMAs still on the job, right? So
yeah. All right. So before investing in a prototype for which famous PDA, did its inventor validate the idea by carrying a block of wood and a whittled down chopstick for a stylus in his pocket for a week, pretending it had functionality? This is an example that we talk about prototypes.
in fact, we've also seen the word pretotype being used for it.
Oh, very nice. This will be a random guess.
Maybe a hint for everyone is that he could hold it in his hand.
Okay. Sajith gets it right again. It is the Palm Pilot.
Ramanand's clue helped.
And then you palmed it away nicely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it is the Palm Pilot. So well done, Sajith, for getting all three questions right. This is definitely something that your PIMA is doing good for you. So that brings us to an end to this section as well. So that's all we had for the next Future Fitness Gym live meeting. We'll be doing it on the topic of what's the best way to learn computational thinking in the future. So that's something which is relevant for people of all ages, and we'll be inviting a well-known computer science educator to talk about it. So this will be in December, and we'll be posting the details of it on the Telegram channel. So that's all, folks, for today. Thanks a lot, everyone. Thanks a lot, Sajith, for giving us your time on a Saturday. So it was a pleasure.
Pleasure. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sajith. Bye.
Thanks, people. It was lovely.
Bye.
Thank you.